This is All India Radio. Please stand by for our next broadcast.
This is All India Radio. You will now hear comments from the press. The Times of India in its editorial title, Enforcement is Key, says, into the second week of the amendments to Motor Vehicles Act kicking in, the step to sharply increase fines for violations remains controversial. Gujarat this week reduced some of the fines set by the centre on humanitarian grounds. The overarching aim of the amendments has wide support. Some of the measures in the amendments, particularly the one relating to encouraging good Samaritans, are welcome. The debate is over a steep hike in fines. The record across the world is decidedly mixed, but fine remains a popular tool. What is unambiguous is that the problem of fatalities is more pronounced in the developing world, which WHO says accounts for 93% of fatalities with around 60% of vehicles. Richer countries have created safer roads over the last 4 decades. There are 2 solutions and both are needed. One is to strengthen the regulatory and enforcement framework. 2. Significantly improved road design in India, which is also a cause of fatalities. The paper writes that a model where most fines escalate with repeat offences with the possibility of flying below the radar minimized is the way forward. Technology today provides a cost-effective solution to implement this model. If such solutions start in the biggest urban centres and key highways of every state, there will be an early impact and fatalities will reduce. The Business Standard in its editorial title, Safety on Road, writes, the Motor Vehicles Amendment Act 2019, which came into effect at the beginning of this month, is making headlines thanks to the steep fines for violation of traffic rules. Some state governments have opposed it, primarily because of the provisions of higher penalties. The Gujarat government, for instance, has decided to reduce penalties for a number of offences, including not wearing a helmet and seatbelt. While the Act has several provisions, such as the constitution of a motor vehicle accident fund to provide compulsory insurance cover to all road users and the possibility of developing a national transportation policy, it's the higher level of penalties that is being debated the most. The idea is that higher penalties will lead to better driving discipline and help make Indian roads safe. News reports show that the number of violations, at least in the national capital, has come down significantly because of the higher penalties. The paper writes, higher penalties for violating traffic rules will itself not help if policing is not effective. The police should also use more technology, which will not only help reduce monitoring cost over time, but also eliminate the possibility of people harassed and lead to better results. The Financial Express, in its editorial title, Road to Disaster, writes, states diluting Motor Vehicle Act provisions is a bad idea. Whether the large penalties in the Motor Vehicles Amendment Act 2019 prove to be the deterrent they are intended to be or not will only be clear in the coming months. But ever since the new penalty regime came into effect, the large fines have dominated the public discourse. The paper writes, a state moving to take the bite out of the new regime, motor vehicles being in the concurrent list by reducing some of the fines to a fraction of that prescribed under the new law is a patent misstep. The Business Line, in its editorial title, A Moonstruck Nation, says, despite the setback, the lunar mission counts as a success. The paper writes, officials at the Indian Space Research Organisation have noted that even given the bleak prospects of establishing contact with the crash-landed Vikram, whose location on the lunar surface has since been pinpointed, the fact that the orbiter is working fine means that up to 90% of the mission objectives has been achieved. The orbiter is expected to be functional for a year or more, and the payloads on board are sending back reams of data. For instance, the Chase 2 payload will measure the temporal variations in the lunar exosphere, and the Rambha DFRS payload will study variations of electron density in the moon's ionosphere. Taken with all the other data streams expected, this will expand the frontiers of scientific knowledge for all of humanity. No less significant is the mission's role in firing up the imagination of millions of Indians, particularly impressionable school children, in a way that will have an immeasurable multiplier effect. Modi's presence at the Mission Control Center, of course, served to enhance the media visibility for the enterprise. But it was the audacity of the project, with India bidding to become only the 4th country to attempt a soft landing on the moon, that ignited Indian minds. In school after school, that found expression in essays that channeled a lively interest in pure science. Given the challenges that India faces in inculcating a scientific temper among its populace, the contribution of this event in advancing that goal cannot be overestimated. That 2 women scientists are the vanguard of the mission is also an aspirational symbol of gender equality. Those intangible gains count for as much as the scientific data that the mission will harvest. Those were the comments from the press, presented to you by the News Services Division of All India Radio.
That program was broadcast from the Delhi station of All India Radio. Here now are the program highlights for this evening and tomorrow. First, a look at the programs for this evening.